Okay. Let's fucking go, brother. So, you've been told that the path to authority is to study the best coaches in your space. You have to model them. You have to build on what is already proven. Well, that advice will make you only capable, but it will never make you the go-to coach because your audience already knows and follows the people that you learn from. And the moment your thinking resembles theirs, you don't compete with them. You just become a free sample of them. Well, I want to talk about the gap. So if you're operating somewhere between 5 to 50,000 followers, there is a good chance that you already know this feeling. The content is already working, the people are watching, commenting and sharing. The engagement is freaking real. But the clients aren't coming. Or they're trickling when they should be flowing. And you can't figure out why. So you do what everyone tells you to do. You rebuild the offer, you niche down further and post more consistently. Maybe try a new format. But that gap doesn't close. So here's what's actually going on, right? The gap isn't in your offer, or in your niche, or in the algorithm, or your posting frequency, or the hook formula you've been using. It's in what I call the intellectual trust. And most coaches have never even heard it framed this way, which is exactly why most coaches never close it. So there are two types of trust that your audience builds with you. The first is personal trust. Well, they they like you. They believe that you're genuine and authentic. They feel that that you actually care about the people that you teach. And this gets built through consistency, personality, and showing up every single day. And most coaches who get to 10,000 followers have a decent amount of this. And well, the second one is the intellectual trust. They believe that you figured out that they couldn't have got anywhere else. That your diagnosis of their problem is more accurate than what's actually available to them. That your framework is genuinely yours, and that makes it irreplaceable. Personal trust makes people follow you, but intellectual trust makes people pay you. And the reason good coaches with real engagement can convert is almost always the same thing. They have personal trust issues, but not intellectual trust. Their audience likes them. But but they don't believe that the thinking is original. That's the gap. That's what you're actually closing when you become the go-to coach. And now, here is the most uncomfortable part. In most coaching niches right now, there are maybe 10 to 15 thinkers whose frameworks actually shape the conversation. Well, take Alex Hormozy on offers and value equations. Take Dan Coe on the one-person business model, and a handful of others depending on the specific space that you're in. And every coach who's built their following in the last 5 years has learned from them. Prove me wrong, because they've read all the books, they've taken all the courses, they've absorbed all the frameworks that have been laid out. Because these people were the first movers, or these people knew how to differentiate themselves from the crowd. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're building. But then they went and taught those frameworks to their audience. And sometimes they repackaged it, sometimes they remixed it, but always traceable back to the same handful of the sources. So what you have right now is a market where the content is technically solid. They're genuinely useful and almost entirely derivative. Nobody's lying to anyone, but everybody sounds like a slightly better produced version or remix of the same three people at the top. And your audience has been consuming this content long enough to know it. And they follow a coach posting Hormozy style offer breakdowns and think somewhere below consciousness that I already know this and I follow the original. They already know the stuff, bro. So they follow a coach teaching the one-person business model, and the feeling is the same. They feel like, well, I've seen this. I know where it came from. And they don't say it out loud, but most of them can name what's missing. But the feeling is there. And that feeling, that low grade sense that nothing in this content could have come from this specific person, is what kills intellectual trust. Well, take cult leaders don't copy other leaders. They have a cult for a reason. And most of these people at the top are running a cult. And that's the trap for you, because it's invisible to you, because everything you're doing feels like the right thing to do. You're studying the best. You're doing on what works right now. You're building on what works. You're being rigorous, but the output is still borrowed, and borrowed is the one thing that cannot compound into go-to. So all you have to do is become very good at teaching other people's thinking. Well, that's not nothing. but it is the ceiling for you. And the go-to coach in any niche is not the most knowledgeable person in it. Most of the time, they're not even the most technically skilled. But what they have and what separates them from every equally capable coach around them is a perspective that couldn't have come from anyone else. It's a diagnosis of a problem that traces back to their own experience, their own unique experience, their own reasoning, their own testing, not to the conclusions of someone that they studied. So when an audience encounters that, something really shifts. Something shifts. And the content stops feeling like a good explanation and starts feeling like a discovery. They finish a video and think, I couldn't have heard this from anyone else. I couldn't have heard this anywhere else. At the moment, and that moment is where intellectual trust is built. That moment is what converts. And to understand this, and to understand how this works at the highest level, I want you to go back to someone who solved this problem in a way that nobody in the coaching industry has come close to replicating. Aristotle. He spent 20 years studying under Plato. He's the most influential philosopher alive, the greatest thinker of his era by a considerable margin. Aristotle observed everything, and he was probably the most rigorously educated person in the entire ancient world by the time that he was done. And he could have spent the rest of his life expanding Plato's framework, teaching it to new students, and building his reputation on borrowed authority of the greatest man that he had ever known. But instead, he disagreed with him, and he publicly and systematically he built his own theory of logic, his own framework for knowledge, his own systems of ethics, but not from Plato's consciousness, but from his own first principles. He used 20 years of absorbed thinking as a resource material, and then he taught faster. He became the more influential thinker of the two. And it's not because he rejected his teacher, but it's because he refused to stop at his teacher's conclusions. He used the learning as a launching pad, not a final address. And that distinction is the whole thing. The coaches who become the go-to aren't ignoring the frameworks that came before them. They've absorbed them completely, and then they've used them as a starting point, not an end point. They've questioned everything around them and pushed past every conclusion. And they built something from their own experience that they couldn't have come from anyone else's. Well, it's not rejection of what works, but it was something harder. It is transcendence of the already concluded thing. And let me make this more concrete to you. I want you to picture two coaches who are in the same niche with similar follower count and same posting frequency. Well, Coach A has built their framework by absorbing the best in their space and synthesizing it well. Their content is accurate, useful, and well produced. Their audience respects them. People follow and engage regularly. And Coach B has done the same absorbing. But then they've spent real time interrogating their own experience, what they've actually tested, what actually failed when it shouldn't have, where the mainstream advice kept being wrong for them, what they'd argue against if someone made them defend a point or position. They built the framework from that interrogation. And when you watch Coach A, you get value. The territory feels similar. You might not be able to name exactly who they learned from, but the ideas feel like you've encountered somewhere before. And when you watch Coach B, something different happens. It's not more information. It's a different origin. And you finish the video thinking, this person has actually figured something out. It's not just that he learned something and Coach B is the only one that he am. And this isn't really abstract Edelman, because Edelman, the global trust research firm that measures this across industries, found that 71% of all the decision makers consider less than half the thought leadership they consume, to be genuinely valuable. 71%. In a world where content output has never been higher, the market is drowning in technically useful, intellectually borrowed content, and audiences are getting better at filtering it. What Edelman also found was that the content that actually converted was that the one that moved people from consumer to buyer, shared one shared one characteristic, uh, and it was a perspective that the reader couldn't have gotten somewhere else. A unique position, a novel point. It's not better production or more tactics. A genuinely useful original angle that they hadn't considered. And here's what makes this more urgent than it sounds right now. As AI floods every niche with technically competent content, the scarcity value of original thinking compounds. But you cannot automate original. The coaches who build from their own first principles will matter more, not less. And not over the next few years, it's not because of that they're working harder, but because they're the only ones producing something like the market that the market can't replicate. And the window to own intellectual territory in your niche is open right now, and it will not stay open for long. So what does this mean for how you actually build? The part to go the part to go to isn't content anymore. Isn't a sharper funnel. It isn't a better positioning statement or a 180-day authority blueprint. Those are all downstream of the real problem. But the real work is thinking, specifically building your content from your own first principles, the belief that you form from your own experience and the problem that you actually solve, and the frameworks that are yours because you built them, not because you absorbed them. And that doesn't mean ignoring everything that you have learned, because Aristotle didn't burn Plato's work. It means doing the work to trace your thinking back to its own source. Which parts of what you teach did you genuinely discover? Which of your own experiences, your own failure, your own pattern recognition, the things that you know to be true, that nobody's bothered to say clearly, that you have never turned into a framework. That's where the original thinking lives. Uh, Not in what you have studied, but in what you've lived through and actually thought about it. And when you build from that place, something changes. Your audience feels the difference. It's not analytical, it's in the gut that I love your content becomes I need this person specifically. The gap between following and paying closes, not because you've gotten better at selling, but because the thing that they were missing, the belief that you are thinking is irreplaceable, is now there. And the actual foundation of authority, it is there. The willingness to think for yourself in public and build from what you only could have built until the perspective you carry is the one that you couldn't have come from anywhere else. So so here's what to do with this. Before you put out your next piece of content, you have to ask yourself one question. Could this idea have come from someone else? Could your audience trace this back to a framework they've already seen? If yes, don't scrape it. But what I want you to do is interrogate it. That come up with what's your actual take on it, what you've actually experienced that extends or contradicts the mainstream version of this. And where does your thinking genuinely diverge from the people that you have learned from? Because people only buy from people. People don't buy coaching, they buy coaches. And if you're able to authentically express your real self of who you are, your values, your interests, the way you speak, the way you portray yourself, it will all compound into trust and your uniqueness. And even one original angle inside a video built on familiar frameworks is enough to start building intellectual trust. And once you start building from your own principles consistently, the voice compounds and the trust compounds. The gap closes. I built a 6-week process that does exactly this. And it takes you through the full audit of what you actually believe, helps you pull out the frameworks that are genuinely yours, and rebuilds your content foundation from the ground up. So the content that you make that point, from that point forward, is actually yours. And the way that drives conversions. It's called the foundation first. So if this is the thing that's been missing for you, I want you to DM me the word first, and I'll send you the rest of the detail. Okay? So the go-to coach in your niche isn't the one who learned the most. It's the one who taught the most. I want you to start there. Thank you for watching this video.